Hey, what's going on, guys? Dagon30 here. Today I want to show you how I tuned my memory out. So if you want to follow along or at least get some tips and tricks on how to do it, you can do that. I will tell you this. Make sure you do the research on whatever RAM you are running, because this can actually mess up your stuff pretty good if you do try to go beyond Expo or XMP. So this is mostly for an AMD system. Intel runs a better memory controller than AMD does when it comes to higher frequencies. So keep in mind this is mostly for AMD, but some of these lessons can actually go towards Intel also. You just got to use a little common sense and research and go from there. So let's go ahead and get started. So I have mine set to Expo 1 because I'm using a 9950 X3D, and I have it set for 6,000 mega transfers. I kept the multiplier right here at 60, and I set my infinity fabric to 2067. I can get away with 2100, but for stability's sakes and to keep temps on the lower end, I put it at 2067. It's like the best bang for your buck in my opinion. It uses a little less power, which means you have a little less heat, but you still get the little bit of a performance boost of having that. Some people can actually get away with even a little higher, but I like to have a little more stability. And then I set my UCLK to 1-to-1 mode, which is this right here. Now, if you're going above 6,400 mega transfers, you're pretty much going to have to go to this one. But as everyone should know by now, if you haven't heard, keep it in 1-to-1 mode at anything below 6,400 is the sweet spot for AMD chips or CPUs. So I am running a Corsair Dominator Titanium kit at 6,000 mega transfers with CL30. So I did the research, and I want to make sure I didn't want to put too much voltage. So this was set to auto and this was set to auto. So to make sure when you're tuning out your memory, you're actually going to add more heat to it and power, because tighter timings mean you need more power. So I went ahead and set it to 1.410 volts. Same right there for each RAM stick. And I left the rest at auto. You can kind of mess with this a little bit, but I found keeping it auto was still okay, because you really don't want to go above what's already stated here. Same thing right here. I would not go above 1.45. If you would only want to go there if you're really trying to push some serious tightening on your timings. But for me, like I said before, I want to maintain the coolest temperature that I can while having some performance improvement and stability. So I just keep it right here. It worked out for me. So let's go ahead and go to advanced voltage settings. Right here, I kept everything pretty much at auto because that's best for stability. And now let's go into the timings. So your biggest performance gain when you're trying to do the tuning out your memory is out of this first primary timings here. Your CAS latency, my setting up for Expo 1 for JDEC, meaning it was pretty much what it came stock as, was 30. The TRCDWR was at 36, 36, TRP 36, and TRES at 76. This is where you're going to be your first big performance gain right here. And standard, the lower the numbers, the better, right? Thinking about all this setup is like you taking a box and you're putting information in the box, closing the box, and then sending the box out. This is kind of what all this means. It's really oversimplified explanation, but this stuff can get really technical. And typically what happens is if you take this plus this, it's going to equal that. And then this plus this will equal that. That's what I found in a lot of the modern RAM stuff, and it works out pretty good. Usually it all lines up. You can still get away with a little bit of variation, but everyone's RAM sticks are a little different. It depends if you have ADI. It depends on if SK Hynix makes it. It depends on if it was Samsung. Corsair and G-Skill, I believe, has some of the best, have the best RAM to when it comes to being able to do programming and tightening your timings and stuff like that. So stick with those and you have a pretty good chance. So right here is the original JDEC, and this is what I tighten it to. Now I do suggest when you're adjusting your timings and making it tighter, you do it in small increments. So what I did was I changed CAS latency. I left it all like this, and I changed CAS latency to 28, and I ran a bunch of tests on OCCT. I ran it for at least an hour. I watched it. No errors came up. I checked for any errors on the Windows logs. Nothing came up. I said, cool. So I kept these at 36, and then I lowered my TRAS to 72. And then that worked out, because I know from my past experiences, these add up and that would work. But you always, like I said before, you always want to step it down little by little with RAM, because you can really mess it up. You can corrupt your system. You have to start fresh and reset your BIOS constantly. It's a big pain in the butt. But once I got this going good, I did notice a pretty good performance gain. And from there, I knocked it down to these right here. So I was like, all right, let me try from 112 to 1010, or not 1010, to 110. And I ran another test, worked out fine. And so I kept it. And then I went to right here to TWR from 90. I tried 60 and it worked out pretty good. So then I kept knocking it down little by little and it worked out good. And I got it to 48 and I'm pretty happy with 48. So that 48 is a little on the aggressive side, but I decided to keep it since it was stable. And you can actually probably 50, I think I got 55 for a while and it was working out good. But like I said, I started to get a little adventurous and I got it to 48. So I'm going to keep it at that. Now this is one of the few occasions where you want the number to be higher. Reason being is this can cause some of the most instability and the most heat on your RAM. And when your RAM is pushing over 55 degrees plus, you start getting diminishing returns and excessive heat, and you could have a chance to start burning out your RAM. And the reason being is this actually helps you, like the snappiness and the responsiveness of your RAM. And if I'm trying to remember, I can't remember off the top of my head, but the max you can get is 655, like 70 or something like that. The JDEC comes with 11,700, which ain't bad, but it is actually pretty slow. So what I did with this was I doubled it. So I went from 11,700 to like 23,400, somewhere around in there. I'm bad at math. And that worked out great. I did notice a performance improvement. Of course, a little heat came with it, but that's what happens when you mess with the TREF. And then from there, I did some more testing, OCCT, looked for error logs, nothing came up, everything worked fine. At this point, I started gaming with it too, because your best benchmark is, when it comes to seeing if your stuff works, ain't really all the benchmarks. It's when you play your games and do your video editing or whatever else you do. That's when you really notice changes in your system, right? So after that, I knocked it up a little by little, 40,000, 45,000, 50,000. I did increments of pretty much 5,000. And I got it to 65,000, which is really close to the max you're supposed to have. And I just went ahead and kept it on here, again, for stability and to keep it at a cooler temperature. So I'm not messing with this anymore. Right here for TRC1. Now this is also another setting right here that can help your system performance when it comes to responsiveness. 884 is actually really loose timing, and I don't know why, but it is. And maybe they're just doing it for stability, which I understand. But I went ahead and knocked it down to 600 and ran all the tests, like I said, and it worked out pretty good. And then I knocked it down to 500. That worked out pretty good. And then after doing some research, right around 460 to 480, I found out is where you really want to it starts getting kind of aggressive. So to be a little cautious, I just put it at 480, ran all the tests, and everything was stable. Another thing I forgot to mention, now these are usually set to auto, but I found out that when you set it to auto, you have the chance that the system's going to choose these to be higher timings for stability reasons. But if you manually set it to that, it's pretty much telling the system that you want it to stay at 36 no matter what. So when you're tightening your timings, leaving things on auto is okay, but you still have a chance of having looser timings because the system is always going to err on the side of being stable, and so it will raise. You may not see it, but it will do that. I left these two right here on auto because it's pretty much matching what I'm doing for the most part. And these are somewhat newer settings that, I mean, I've been doing this for years, and you can mess with these and it's okay, but I found out that it didn't really help me out too much, so I just left that part on auto. And then right here for the TRTP, I set that to 16 actually right off the bat. It ran great. I tested it, and if you haven't noticed, yes, I'd made each change one by one and did testing. This thing took weeks for me to tune out properly. I know some people may think it's a waste of time, but I was just trying to err on the side of caution because when RAM is costing thousands of dollars and I'm running 64 gigs of DDR5 titanium, yeah, I'm not taking the chance of burning out my sticks. I got real lucky when I bought these though, because I bought it right before the Ramageddon thing, and my kit only cost me about $500. Now it's worth over $1,300. So I never, in my 20 years of doing this, ever thought I'd have a spend that much on RAM before. I did the same thing here. I took what that is. I went ahead and cut it in half. Usually I would like to step it down to 6 and then 4 and try it, but I was taking a chance. I kept this at 15 and I left the rest on auto. And I pretty much just matched everything up because all this was set to auto, and I matched it up to where it wants to be at. That way it keeps the things as tight as possible. And same thing right there. I just kept that on auto and for stability reasons, and everything else too. So after I did all that, and for one final test, I did like a 3-hour test on OCCT. I played a bunch of Crimson Desert and Cyberpunk and amongst a bunch of other games. Everything was pretty stable. I did notice my RAM sticks usually run right around, when I was playing, 49 degrees temperature with the fans going and case cooling and all that. Well, when I tuned out my memory, I noticed that the temperature actually went to pretty steady at 43 degrees. So it made it more efficient and cooler. So I know that when you change the stuff, it adds heat, but when you make the memory tune run more efficient, you save yourself a lot of power and a lot of heat, and yeah, it just runs better. So, but that's how I tuned out my memory, guys. If you have any suggestions, let me know. If you think I made a mistake somewhere, let me know. I'll do research and I'll make corrections if I made big mistakes. But that's my warning, though, again, is before you even attempt to do anything real big on memory tuning and tightening, make sure you do your research, because your RAM sticks are going to be different from everyone else's. You got to make sure you have a die. You have to make sure the manufacturer who made it and stuff like that. So, but all right, that's my little rambling video on memory tuning. Maybe I can go more in depth in the future, but I'll talk to you guys later. Bye.